Where do I put this? I'm gonna, yeah. All right. So scaling with grace, that's the nice part of the title, and then the rest is developing hybrid automation methods for growing a healthy community. I didn't think that title out that much, but I'll explain it. So I want to start at the beginning. So a lot of the people I know who work in trust and safety, content moderation, and community management had their start in volunteer moderation. You know, either it's like an IRC channel or a subreddit, or a forum, and that's where a lot of people kind of like cut their teeth and learned, you know, experimented and felt comfortable trying things out where the stakes aren't quite as high. And so I have been doing, I think, community moderation for 10 or something years, you know, across Reddit, Facebook groups, Discords, Steam groups. There's a lot of weird places that you can moderate. And so eventually, a couple years ago, I started transitioning into content moderation. And content moderation, if you don't know, is kind of what social media companies do these days, where, you know, there's like 3,000 people somewhere, maybe, I think a lot of them are in India. And when you make a report or an algorithm flags something, it goes to that it goes to like one of these 3,000 people, and they decide like, yes, this violates policy, or no, it doesn't. And these people kind of govern the entirety of a platform like Facebook. And so being in content moderation, you know, we transitioned from all these interesting questions about like, oh, how do you make a community feel healthy? How do you make people feel safe? How do you deal with like the chilling effect where, you know, marginalized people don't necessarily feel like safe talking in an environment where there's not very healthy language towards them. And instead, the only question they ask is, how does it scale? And so I found myself, I first hated that question, but now I increasingly find myself asking that question as online communities become these like primary social spaces for many people in like the developed world. And so I'm looking at you guys, and I want to figure out, okay, we have content moderation, we have community moderation, and as I transitioned into content moderation, I was thinking about like, what are the downsides of, what are the gaps of content moderation? And a lot of it is that you don't get context. You know, a person at one of these outsourced spaces in India will look at a piece of content for, you know, a minute. They'll get, you know, the piece of content itself, maybe the person involved, but you don't really do much investigative work. And so I was thinking, as I was going into content moderation, how do we imbue content moderation with the values and the benefits of community moderation or community management? And I really still don't know, but hopefully over the course of this talk I'll find out. So I'm really obsessed with third-party tools. And third-party tools, in case you don't know, are tools that people who are not part of a platform, people make these tools, like, you know, they just code up some scripts, and they like make a Chrome extension, or they make a bot. And usually they need like a platform that's really friendly to people making third-party tools, so having an API. So Reddit does that, Discord does that, Twitch does that. Facebook doesn't really do that. And I think that you can kind of tell. So third-party tools are really important. And so who does the third-party tools? It's typically volunteer moderators. And why I want to focus on it for this talk is community moderators in these various communities like Reddit and Discord and everything, a lot of them are finding themselves right now with communities with thousands and actually millions of people. And you know, usually they're a volunteer team of like, you know, 5 to 10 people who they only have so many hours a day. So they have to come up with ways to deal with like this issue of scale. And what I think is also really exciting about third-party tools is that a lot of the people who do volunteer moderation have development skills as well. So they're at this incredible intersection of people who both have the system building knowledge as well as the domain expertise, on top of the fact that they have to do that work and they have to think about it, the design of these tools immediately in the context of that work. And to me, it's a nice little extra step from like traditional like usability testing or UX, and even like they say like participatory design is like supposed to be involving your stakeholders more. But I think there's nothing that parallels people who are making tools for themselves online. And so one caveat here, wow, I realize I need to talk faster. But one caveat here is, I'm thinking mostly about forum spaces. A lot of volunteer moderators usually operate in forums like Reddit or Discord or Twitch, where they are chat rooms. A lot of the principles from this kind of carry over into networks, and we'll see. So the dynamic that I wanted to point out, so I say like hybrid systems or hybrid automation, and I don't think it's clear what that means. So this picture is theoretically an android and a man in a spacesuit. So the dynamic that I want to highlight here is the idea that an android is basically a robot meant to replicate human behavior and often to do the work of humans, whereas cyborgs are people who are augmented by technology. They can use this technology to kind of carry out whatever they wanted to do. Sometimes it can be something to replace if you lose a limb, you're able to have a leg again that you can walk around on. Or I guess in like fictional science fiction settings, you could have like a gun attached to your arm, and I guess it helps you in some way or another. And in this case, a astronaut, like they do have all of these technologies that are basically attached to themselves that allow them to kind of do the work that they care about. And I guess the term or the phrase that I'm thinking of is automation for augmentation rather than for replacement. And so these are kind of cases where we think about this framing as, there we go, framing of augmenting what moderators are already doing. So I'm going to go into a story, Goldilocks and the Three Algorithms. So Goldilocks had a forum for bear watching, and her forum was actually really picking up because she was in the news for breaking into a bear's house, and people really wanted to see what this forum was about. So she was watching and like really excited as her community grew, but people started like infighting. They're like, no, this is the best bear watching spot. Like this species of bear, I don't know what they talk about. And then eventually a bear forum raided her bear watching forum, and they said all of these terrible comments about bear watchers. I'm trying to be as apolitical here as possible. So the first thing she did was, it was too little. She made like a blacklist, of all those bad words, and she copied Facebook's reporting system to have like, a way for people to point out to her when people were harassing each other. It didn't really work that well because people can kind of circumvent these systems, and she ended up getting so many reports she couldn't really do that much about it. So then she went crazy. So she decided to go really hard on the technology, and she used machine learning systems and a lot of fancy bots. And she also copied Facebook again with this top fan feature where it'd highlight fans who were really into your product, and they like get I think more visible than other fans or other people who follow your Facebook group. And then like a level up system where people could experience for doing good things, because she wanted to reward people who were doing good proactive stuff. But unfortunately, it just like led to too many flags. It led to too many pieces of data that she couldn't really do anything about. And there's kind of a term called pop-up fatigue, where basically when you get too many pop-ups, you just start ignoring all of them. And it ends up being a lot more work dealing with all of these flags. So anyway, she decided to get rid of all of those things, and instead she made like a low-key machine learning system that only got like really bad hate speech words. She got like a sort of a basic blacklist that she could kind of update as she wanted to, and she knew what was on that blacklist, so she could anticipate what it did. She had a Chrome extension that allowed her to log her moderation actions, so she could share what she was doing with another moderator and bring on more people. And so she lived happily ever after. And so I don't think it's really an issue of like too much algorithm or not enough algorithm. It's a matter of being strategic. And so a real-world example of this is Twitch has a bot called AutoMod or Auto Moderator. And so basically it catches when people say bad words, and it shows the moderators, like, here's a bad word, like, do you take this down or not? And they use machine learning. And this is the kinds of settings they give you. So you want to say, like, I want level 2 moderation. I want some moderation. I want some filtering on race, religion, and gender. And so I think for people who don't have their own customized tools, this is actually pretty good if you have a small community. But in a lot of interviews that I was doing with streamers and moderators, if it got beyond a certain point, they had to have their own customized bots. And so what they often did was that they had this on a low level of like, OK, we'll catch the worst of the words. But then for things that people would do that's hard for a machine to catch, like people use memes very strategically, they would raid very strategically. Moderators, through their work, understood how to anticipate that and encoded like these very hard and fast rules that they knew what was happening, they knew what to anticipate, and they knew where gaps were, and so they knew what to watch out for. And so in this case, is using AutoMod and Nightbot is the most common combo, I guess. And so Nightbot is just this chat moderation bot that some dude coded up somewhere. And this is an example of a third-party tool. So it's really important to think about the ways that third-party tools also integrate with native tooling. And so, what tools should you use? And actually, I don't really care about that question. What I care about is process. And I think process is really important because tools will always change. There's always going to be new things. You have different communities, different platforms. So instead, this is the very simplified version of the process that I think about. And I guess I'll start with this one. Goals. So thinking about the goals of your community, I think challenges is the thing that I fixate over most of the time, because I really like thinking about how things can go wrong. Yeah. So challenges are like, OK, so do you have like marginalized people in your community? What are you doing about that? Do you have political discussions in your community? How are you going to deal with that? How public is your community? What platform are you using? If you're using Discord or Twitch, where it's a live chat, you have to be present all the time. Versus a forum, you can be not as present if you have a good notification system. So you have different kinds of challenges that afford you different kinds of interventions. And so interventions are distinct from tools in the sense that like an intervention would be like, I want a warning system. I want a warning system because I want people who violate our policies to learn rather than just kicking them out. So we're thinking about a warning system. So then what kinds of tools can we use to handle those types of warning systems? And like what kinds of processes can we use to make those tools effective? So an example that I actually got recently from moderating a stream, like a marathon stream, was there. So this is basically, I don't know if you guys know Discord. It doesn't matter anymore. So moderation log is, it's like Slack, right? So it's like Slack. And so one of the channels that you have is a moderation log. And the moderation log is when you download a moderation bot that like logs the moderation actions you take as a moderator. Well, this is Blargbot. Blargbot is actually really popular. I love Blargbot. So what happens is that when you ban somebody or you give somebody a warning, Blargbot puts this like little notification or a message into the channel called moderation log. And so basically, they're logging all the actions that you're taking. They show you how many warnings that you've given. They give you the reason that you basically entered when you banned somebody. And they say what type of thing it is. Like, is it a warning? Is it a ban? Is it a kick? And so I guess I'm the mod with no chill. So I gave this person a warning. And the nice part is that now that I have this moderation log channel, I can then go back and search it and say, like, OK, we were having some problems with this person. We haven't given them a warning yet, so we don't see like the new total as like 2 yet. So, but we'll look back and say, this person has a history, so we're going to treat them differently. And so, like going back to like the tools and methods, it's important to think about not just what the tool is, but how are you kind of using this tool to your advantage? So for us, we had a big mod chat. Somebody would kick somebody, or somebody would ban somebody. We'd be like, why did you do that? And they'd be like, OK, well, let's go to this channel and look at the reasons. We'd debate over it for a while, and then we'd sort of make our decision: do we stick by it or not? And so we had kind of a due process that used these tools. So now with a portion of that process articulated, I wanted to just talk about some helpful principles and best practices that can sort of inform the ways that you go through this process. So the first principle is that algorithmic systems are fallible, and you just have to lean into it. This is an illustration of a community manager and I guess an AI or algorithmic system, and the framing here is good cop, bad cop, or good cop, bad computer, I suppose. And so I guess the guy in the middle is your community, and so what I want to articulate here is that a lot of people think of just the algorithmic systems that you're using, the community managers are just kind of jumbled together, and like you kind of do things to your community. That's, I feel like I should articulate that differently, but what's important here is actually to distinguish community managers from your algorithmic systems. Given that these algorithmic systems are flawed, and we see this in content moderation, where people are constantly talking about, like in like the news and just like on Twitter, all of these times that people get penalized or they get banned for reasons that are not clear to them or are actually wrong. And what's so frustrating is that you can't do anything about it. You can kind of appeal, like they have appeal systems these days, but the appeal systems are subject to the same limitations as the content moderation systems. So what's really important is actually taking advantage of the strengths of community management, of people who can do that investigative work. You know the rich context from being in a community, and you can be there talking to a person. So you should take advantage of the fact that your algorithmic systems are handling a lot of the repetitive stuff, the stuff that's I guess less ambiguous, and when it makes mistakes, or if things need a different kind of escalation, you can be there. And what's important about this is that a lot of the fear of scaled systems is that they become deeply impersonal. And it's true, for the most part they do, especially with like huge online platforms. So then how do you offer a counterpoint? And so I guess the beginning of that is like, don't be deceptive. So when you I really like having examples from Reddit, so you're going to see a lot of this. So what's really important here is that when a bot is like, talking to a person who violated a policy, or if they are posting a comment at the beginning of a post to sort of warn people preemptively, hey, let's like be nice here, it's very clear that it's a bot. They have all of these sort of signals that, yes, this is a bot talking to you. They say, I'm a bot, and this action was performed automatically. And this is important because ambiguity is actually really disconcerting for people and erodes user trust. If you don't know if it's a human, if you don't know it's a bot, you really don't know how to treat them, and you don't really know how much agency you have in this interaction. So people know it's a bot, and that's great. And that kind of allows people to know the terms that they're on. But also, it gives community managers an opportunity to actually get feedback. There's kind of a documented phenomenon that people are reporting harassment and violations less on social media because they don't trust the platform. They don't know what's going to happen. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons. And also, it's just like it constantly makes mistakes. And I think what's important here is they actually have, I'll just keep going forward. They have this idea, like, please contact the moderators of the subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. And if you notice on a lot of the posts on Reddit that have bots, most of them, not most of them, I don't know, many of them, the good ones, have this idea like, OK, please contact us, and you see it over and over and over. So people know that they have some kind of recourse. And it's important that it's repetitive, because if people technically know, I mean, it's a usability thing, right? If they technically know, then they may or may not pursue it. But if it's kind of in the culture, if it's very present to them, then people feel much more comfortable pursuing these pathways. And what's important about this is that they know that there's a human behind it. They know the relationship between the automated system and the person. It's not ambiguous. It's not all muddled together. They feel like they know where they can go. And if the algorithm fails them, it's less almost traumatizing, or it kind of mitigates a lot of the erosion of trust when they realize they have some recourse if like an automated system makes a mistake. So again, with this one, if you have any questions about this removal, feel free to message the moderators. So this post actually is not necessarily automated. What often happens now on Reddit is people have rule systems. And I see somebody from Reddit there, so this must be very basic for you. But so they have like rule systems. So one of them is off topic. So the really nice part as a moderator with some of these automated systems is that instead of having to like type out, hey, this is off topic, you just like click like off topic. Maybe rambling if that's, I guess, a policy violation. And it's just very clear, like, OK, these are the ways that a person's post doesn't follow the policies of the system. And so that if you have any questions about this removal, it's not just about the algorithmic mistakes, but about the human mistakes. And I think just having these norms of people feeling comfortable reporting is important. For capacity issues, so I know it's very common for people to like over-report. Like they'll say like, somebody called me racist, it was harassment, and then they like put in a report, and you're like, oh, there's nothing I can do with this. And there's so many of those. You can have various kinds of barriers where somebody will have to actually fill out a form and like actually add a lot of details into it. And so what's nice is that it adds enough of a threshold that a lot of bad faith reporters or impulse reporters don't actually follow through. So I mean, it's important to have this kind of dual approach of like making it deeply accessible, making it very visible, but having enough of a threshold that like people won't just report if they feel like it. So the last sort of part is making education, rehabilitation, and norm setting easy and fun. So again, this post, I love this post. So you have the reason is that it's off topic, right? And what is so beautiful is that like if you have any questions to how your post has been removed, like please see here. And it gives people kind of a framework or guidance for actually pursuing the kind of recourse that they want. And oh yeah, so I highlighted it there. And that there too. So it turns out there's actually emerging research around the fact that I think people are kind of worried that these seem like deeply impersonal, but a lot of research on like our decisions, actually, does transparency and moderation really matter? And like how do people react to decisions that are made about them if they're giving these very specific kind of guidelines for how to be better? And Civil Servant is an organization or a research institute that has actually done these kinds of A/B testing with moderators. They found that having this very particular kind of format or these different types of elements of a post, whether automated or not, is actually really well received. And so what's important, though, is that it has all the components that a community manager has cobbled together from actually being in a community. So the things that people are being told are actually representative of the values of the communities, the things that they see in their community. So it's not entirely impersonal. Oh, and actually, this is the last one. So stay flexible, or be flexible, stay flexible. And what I mean by this is that it's important to have your tools customized. It turns out of-the-box tools aren't always very useful once you scale. So out-of-the-box are great, like with AutoMod, they're great for these sort of baseline experiences. But as you start to scale, you need to think about what is distinct about your community and challenges. So with Discord, I was trying to download a Discord bot and try to use it, and I was really bad at it. So I Googled like Discord tutorial bot. And so what it actually just gave me was a bunch of tutorials about how to make your own Discord bot. And I did not like that because it was not helpful to me. But it kind of spoke to me about the fact that people really do care about customizing their own bots. And I actually talked to a bunch of Discord moderators where it turns out they all have very distinct preferences over which bots that they used. And not just which bots that they used, but how they customized their bots and like the various practices that they shared. And then finally, like configurations of bots, because you can have multiple bots. And so, people would kind of pick and choose as they kind of moved along over time. And that was really, really important for them to think about like the function of their community and how to think about being in touch with the things that they cared about without overwhelming themselves with too many metrics or instituting a machine learning system that like kind of ostensibly got at the thing that they cared about. But ultimately, like when there was a disconnect between what the machine learning system did and what they wanted, there was not very much they could do about it. So with these bots, they could very, very precisely kind of encode what they cared about and what they wanted. It's the same with Twitch bots. You'll see like charts like these everywhere because people really care about the specificity of the function of these bots. So customization is really important. So I think the computer is happy now. I think what's really important is understanding the relationship between community manager and your automated systems. And it's not just a matter of having enough technology or being able to handle like many users. It's a matter of like how do you adjust to the values of your community, the challenges of your community, in addition to that scale. But it involves like a very deep dive, and so you kind of have to lean into the same impulse you have as a community manager, where you want to like get the rich context, you want to talk to people, you want to be embedded, and you kind of have to do that with automated tools as well. I don't think you should learn to code if you don't want to, but dig into a lot of the details of what make these systems work. Talk to people who use these systems, and if you're using like out-of-the-box tools, or if you're working with a particular platform and using native tooling, and you're not using third-party tools, it's still informative for strategies for how to use native tooling, because it's very common for people to use these systems not as intended. So, a good way to pressure platforms to make better systems is to use them wrong. I think I really care about making automation work, because with content moderation these days, there are like global consequences to gaps being made in terms of like, well, we got 99% of hate speech, but that 1% is like still a million people. And likewise in your communities, if you're scaling it to thousands or tens of thousands of people, I have no idea what kinds of scales you guys are working with, you'll still get hundreds of people who are not captured by your algorithmic systems, and the ways that you scoop them up is through leaning into that community manager impulse and being really deliberate about your relationship between your automated systems and the strengths of community management. Anyway, thank you.